So our final segment today is going to focus on conflict management, and this is probably the area that results in the most calls to me, because if you don't manage conflict at work, then you're probably going to end up, well, and a lot of times you may have a legal issue and an HR issue, and that's where I get involved. So maybe you can follow Lisa Pollock's advice before you get to me. So Lisa is our next speaker. She's the Vice President and Chief Human Resource Officer at the Human Resource Consulting Group. So there she oversees the Human Resources Division. She's got more than 25 years of experience in human resources with expertise in building the human resource functions for businesses. So she focuses on compliance and management counseling, employee relations, and implementing best practices. So she's got certifications as an SPHR and an SCP, like I know many of you do, if you've got HR professionals in the audience. And so today, Lisa's going to talk about those conflicts that come up at work, and if you are a manager or a leader, how to take care of those conflicts so they don't escalate. So Lisa, thanks very much for joining us. Thanks for sharing your slides, and you can get started.
Thank you, Diane. Good morning, everybody. I am thrilled to be here to talk about building strong teams through conflict resolution. It's all about managing conflict effectively so that you can build teams. So it's not just managing conflict, but it's building teams while you're doing it. Here I am. As Diane mentioned, I'm the Human Resource. I work for the Human Resource Consulting Group. I am Vice President and Chief Human Resource Officer there. Here, we are a woman-owned business. We've been in business for 35 years. I'm a generalist, so I provide leadership to my HR business partners, who I can tell you are very busy with conflict resolution these days. I'm sure I don't have to tell you, but we are experiencing an increase in the level of conflict in today's society, whether that's political polarization, cultural differences, or the impact of remote work. And certainly we are still feeling the fallout from COVID. Learning how to manage conflict is becoming more and more important for HR folks, as well as for managers and supervisors. And understanding how to engage in productive conflict rather than avoiding it or escalating it is a vital skill for managers and supervisors. So I have a lot to cover today. I will take questions at the end, please. We will be using the chat like the others have, and we're going to move on. Let's get started. So our learning objectives for today are to recognize and handle conflict and difficult behaviors in the workplace, mastering mediation techniques to make sure that you're able to resolve disputes when they happen, developing assertiveness to communicate needs and boundaries clearly, and apply conflict resolution strategies to create a cohesive and productive work environment. When folks are dealing with conflict, it's hard to get work done. And last but not least, navigating political tensions and maintaining a positive work atmosphere. So section 1 is about managing difficult behaviors. Even in the best work environments, there are employees who exhibit difficult behaviors that you need to address. And we're going to start with a thought starter. And can you please share, using your chat, can you please share one conflict management challenge that you've been facing at work? All right, so just take a couple minutes, throw that in the chat, and we'll talk about that.
Poor attitude, lack of accountability, frequent absences, employee refuses to not work overtime, getting a person to understand it was their behavior, that was the problem.
Got it. Thank you so much, Amanda. And I did figure out how to see the chat, so I won't have to bother you again, I don't think. So these are all great examples of conflict and that you're facing. So the first thing we need to do is to understand those difficult behaviors that are causing the conflict. And I will tell you that Bob and Stephanie certainly set the stage for me today. I'll be weaving in some of their great insights and data from their presentations. So difficult behaviors. The first step to understanding difficult behaviors is to know what they are. We're going to focus on 3 of them today. We're going to focus on poor attitude, chronic complainers, and rule violators. If you could just take a minute, a couple seconds, to read through the definitions so that we're all on the same page on what these difficult behaviors are. And then we're going to dive in a little bit deeper to each one of them. So I'll just give you a couple of seconds to read through those. And I have a feeling that you may have some of these in your organizations. All right, so let's dive in. Andrew, interesting. Same person as all 3. You definitely have your hands full with that employee. So poor attitude, what are the characteristics? Constantly negative. They only focus on problems rather than solutions. When you try to give them feedback, they reject it and they don't want to hear about it. They don't want to hear any guidance. They don't want to try to get better. Lack of engagement, showing disinterest in tasks and projects, and sometimes passive aggressive behaviors become a problem, where your employees are indirectly expressing hostility or resentment. Frequent complaints, regularly voicing dissatisfaction about the work, regardless of what's going on, whether it's something good or whether it's not. They're always going to be complaining about something. And last is a defeatist attitude, exhibiting a why bother, accepting or anticipating failure before it actually happens. So a very negative attitude that they're bringing with them. Now, each of the slides that we're going to go through, we're going to talk about what the characteristics are, and we're also going to talk about the impact on the team and the culture, which I think is critical part of what we want to talk about today, is how to manage that. So with your poor attitude employee, it can translate to lower morale. Poor attitudes can be contagious. So when you have one person with a poor attitude, sometimes it spreads negativity throughout your organization. And negative employees can demotivate others, which translates to a decreased productivity and also a poor collaboration. Negativity and resistance impacts teamwork and therefore increases conflict. And that's what we're here to talk about today. Employees with bad attitudes or poor attitudes are much more likely to engage or to create conflict. Increased turnover. A toxic work environment can drive away talented employees. That leads to higher turnover. It also leads to increased costs in recruiting. The replacement costs for employees who leave you are significant, depending on what level they come in at, but it's definitely an expensive proposition for organizations that have a lot of turnover. And last, and certainly not least again, is consistent negative behavior can tarnish your reputation both internally and with your clients or your customers, whatever you may have. So it may damage your reputation. Negative people that leave your organization are very free to put their comments about your organization on Glassdoor and other social media. So it's important to address your poor attitude employees. Our next is the chronic complainers. They complain consistently and constantly. So the characteristics include constant negativity. They're always finding something to complain about. You'll see definitely a crossover in all of these behaviors. And Andrew has one person that has all three of them. So while they complain, they actually don't come with any solutions, right? So they spend time complaining, but not coming to you with a solution. And they have repetitive complaints over and over. I tell my employees, if they want to come into my office and vent, I have absolutely no problems with that. But at the end of that conversation, our goal is to walk away with, what are we going to do about it? How are we going to handle it? How are we going to make it better? So that's one tip that you can use for folks that come into your office and complain constantly. They're usually pessimistic individuals, and they're certainly resistant to change. They'll complain about a change before it's even implemented and giving it an opportunity to succeed. The impact on the team and the culture, you're going to see a crossover on these. So lower morale and decreased productivity, the same as with our poor attitude individual. Again, poor collaborations. You know, team members may avoid collaborating with people that complain all the time, and that leads to isolation and reduced collaboration time. Increased stress. Constant negativity can increase stress levels, contributing to burnout with your employees. Complainers also hinder innovation. They won't be able to come to you with ideas. They stifle creativity. They focus on problems rather than making things better and putting out new creative ideas. And then again, we're talking about the toxic work environment. Constant complainers spread their negativity throughout the organization that can then contribute to a toxic work environment. And these are all things we certainly want to try to avoid. And the last difficult behavior that we want to talk about today are your rule violators. So these are your folks that have disregard for your policies and your rules and your procedures. They are frequently absent, or they come to work late, or they may take unauthorized time off. They're calling out a lot, leaving early, coming late. While we certainly don't want folks to be doing unethical behavior, that is also some of your rule violators. So they engage in activities that violate your ethical standards or your company's code of conduct. Lack of accountability. Most rule violators don't take ownership of their actions, and they often blame others. So I broke that rule, but I broke it because of someone else. And they're resistant to authority, which is why a lot of times they lead to rule violating, right? So they're challenging or ignoring whatever directives and instructions that you may be giving them from your supervisors and your managers. Some of them go as far as insubordination, and these are definitely going to have an impact on your team and your culture. What is that impact? Again, decreased morale, erosion of trust. Consistent rule violations can lead to a lack of trust from the other employees that are following the rules. So if they constantly see somebody violating a rule and not having it addressed, or they don't know that it's being addressed, then they tend to lose trust in management's ability to resolve the issues. Again, reduce productivity. All of these three behaviors have an impact on productivity, whether that's in a production environment or just getting projects done and meeting deadlines. Increased conflict again. They create tension and conflicts because their employees feel that their behaviors or the lack of addressing their behaviors is unfair, and it's certainly disruptive to the organization. Sometimes what happens with rule violators is your standards actually become lower. So if a variety of employees are consistently violating your rules and it's tolerated, it can lead to a general decline in the standards in your workplace, because if so-and-so can do it, then I can do it. And last is our legal and safety risks. This is of utmost importance. Violations of safety protocols can get people hurt. And certainly violations of your ethical standards may expose you to legal risks. And then you'll have to call Diane for some help on that one. All right. So we're going to move over to a video. And if all goes well, I'm going to play the video. I just want to set the stage. We're going to listen to Simon Sinek about creating positive change and making it positive in a negative situation. The goal of conflict resolution is to address the behaviors, correct the actions, provide corrective action, engage your employee, and retain your employee. Now, while the goal is to retain your employee, that's not always possible. There are times where you have to let somebody go. Performance is two-pronged. It's not only what you do and what you accomplish, but it's how you go about doing that. If you have a great employee, technically, who is a disaster when it comes to behavior, you may have to make that difficult decision. So let's listen to Simon, and he has some tidbits for us and some insights.
So it happens a lot. And I sometimes point it out. Yeah. I'm like, what's making you so negative? I never say why so negative, because it's ironically the question why is actually, it's an emotional question. It can be perceived as aggressive. I'm like, what's making you so negative? Like, there's a lot of good things happening here. I want to know more. So replacing judgment with curiosity is one part. The other thing is to just allow them to feel that way. So it's like, oh yeah, I hear you, acknowledging the negativity and then sort of moving on. But I also find that being focused on where the future is important. And by the way, not all negativity is bad. People who, are sometimes very often criticized at work because they're always pointing out the problems, and you hear bosses say, don't bring me problems, bring me solutions. It's like, well, if I knew the solution, I wouldn't be coming to you, Yeah. I mean, there's two types of negative Nellies. There's one that is always negative and offers no solution and stands on the sidelines. I don't need those people in an organization. Sure. But the people who constantly bring problems, but they're willing to roll up their sleeves and try and find a solution, those people are extremely valuable inside an organization, because they're helping us see things, cover our blind spots that we're not seeing. And they're willing to roll up their sleeves. So not all negativity is bad. It's what we do with that negativity afterwards. We're willing to work together, or willing to just sort of lean back and lean out. And I'll, like I said, I'll say it. I'll say, I don't know what's making you negative. Yeah. Tell me more. Yeah. We in our company have a rule, which is if the reaction is above a 5, it's about something else. It's like, why did you leave the fridge open? It's like, clearly not about the fridge. Right. You always leave the fridge open. Okay. Do not react about the fridge. Sure. Absolutely. So it's the same thing. We find that in work. Like, people sometimes get very amped up about something, and you sort of pay attention, like that reaction to what we're talking about don't match. This is about something else. And this is where good leadership and good human skills come into play, which is, are you able to read the room and figure out what's going on here? Are they having a bad day? Is there something else? Or is there something that I don't know about the work that we're doing that I can easily help address and fix? Or did somebody just hangry or tired, and that's okay too? Companies so rarely teach us the human skills of how to have difficult conversations. So if somebody's constantly negative, and it is actually...
I'm going to stop that now. He does go on for a little bit longer, but I find his thoughts to be very valuable, and we're going to talk about underlying issues, right? So he talks about the refrigerator, and clearly the person was not upset about the refrigerator, and that's a lot of conflict. Sometimes it's hard to figure out where it's coming from, and I'm going to give you some tips and some practical advice on determining where that comes from. So the first thing we need to do is address the behaviors. The worst thing you can do is to just let things go, because as we talked about earlier, it just perseverates through the organization and can cause some serious consequences for your organization. So how do we address them? For the poor attitude, identifying the cause, what is that underlying reason for the poor attitude? Providing feedback, even though people with poor attitude tend to dismiss your feedback, you still want to give constructive feedback, highlighting the behaviors and their impacts on others. Offering support. Provide resources to your employees, supporting them to help them improve, such as training, counseling, coaching. We've heard a lot about coaching today, so you can apply that to your poor attitude employees as well. Set clear expectations. You need to communicate very directly that what are the expected behaviors and what are the consequences of continued negativity. And then you can flip that over, and if you are continually encouraging positivity within your organization, that too is contagious. So if you foster a positive work environment by recognizing and rewarding positive behaviors, that will go a long way with your people that have the poor attitudes. And then employees will tend to be more positive and won't tolerate those that aren't quite as positive. Moving on to the chronic complainer. The first thing you want to do is you want to listen and you want to validate and allow them to express their concerns fully before you respond. And you want to show that you understand their feeling with phrases like, I see that you're frustrated. This sounds challenging. Avoid dismissing their feelings and their complaints outright, but also in the same time, be sure not to reinforce their behaviors by your response. We talked about identifying the underlying issue. I think words that you can use for that are along the lines of, what's bothering you most about this situation? Not the situation itself, but what's bothering you most about it? Is there something else contributing to it, just like the refrigerator? Encourage solution-oriented thinking. As I mentioned earlier, my employees can complain to me, but we always end with solution-oriented thinking. What can we do better? Brainstorm ideas. Ask the person, what changes can we make that would make this better for you? Set boundaries. Be clear that complaints should always be done in a constructive way, not out on the production floor. They should be done in private, and chronic complainers for boundaries should be that those complaints go to management rather than employee to employee. And again, offering support, letting them know that you're there for them. You can suggest one-on-one meetings with yourself or stress management if their underlying issue is stress. You can look at their workload and see what you could do about that. And rule violators. All right, so our rule violators, we're going to make sure that we clarify expectations, make sure that they know the rules, ensure they understand what's expected of them. Making sure you're consistently enforcing the rules, right? And consistently and fairly across all of your employees. You want to make sure you're avoiding any type of perception of bias or preferential treatment with your rule violators. A lot of times peer pressure helps with your rule violators. If everybody is held to one rule and one person's violating it, a lot of time your peers and the fellow employees will jump in because everyone wants a conflict-free environment. Immediate feedback. You have to address your issues right away. You can't let them fester. Give it to them right in the moment so they are feeling that rule that they just violated, and you can address it right away. Documenting incidents. Document. Documentation is key. In human resources, we're always coaching supervisors and managers about maintaining documentation. So you want to document the incidences. So you may need to use it later for progressive discipline. And you also want to document the incidents. So if you are unfortunate enough to receive a complaint, either from the CHRO or from an attorney or threatening litigation, you have the proper documentation to support whatever disciplinary action that you applied. Provide training. right? Make sure they know what the rules are. This is something that some people forget about. You sometimes have to reinforce your rules over and over. So make sure you're providing training. If you have a handbook, that's a good place. You can refer back to the handbook with them so that they know what the expectations are. And setting those consequences. Clearly communicate when you're providing your feedback that continued rule violation is going to have disciplinary action. And we always use the terms further disciplinary action up to and including termination of your employment. And that's when situations get really serious. All right. We're going to do another thought starter again. So we talked a lot about human skills today. So what human skills do you need to strengthen? Let me start that again. What human skills do you need to strengthen your confidence to effectively address, correct, engage, and retain? And if you can throw that in the chat again, I can see that now. So, Monica, understand that. Babysitting. Sometimes you feel like you're constantly micromanaging people. Oh, great words coming up. Empathy, listening. Keep emotions out. Patience, that's certainly one we can all learn from. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, everybody, for those. Those are very good. All right. We're going to move on to conflict in the workplace. So conflict is inevitable, right? It's a part of a workplace when you bring people together, especially when you bring diverse teams together. It's important to understand that it doesn't necessarily mean anything is wrong. And sometimes it's very high in collaborative environments. So conflict typically arises as a result of differences in perspectives and approaches. And these differences, though, offer potential for us to learn from each other. So while we have conflict in the workplace, it actually has potential positive consequences, right? So conflict may cause discomfort, but when it's managed effectively, it can be a very powerful tool for growth, innovation, and building stronger relationships. I think the key is that you need to see conflict as not as a roadblock, but as an opportunity to challenge our thinking. And when you have diverse thoughts, then you become stronger as a team. You want to avoid groupthink type environments. And positive conflict, that's what we call it, positive conflict can lead to creative solutions and innovative ideas that you may not have had if you didn't have the conflict to begin with. Let's talk a little bit about what causes conflict. We've already started it. At its very core, workplace conflict arises when individuals or groups have differing opinions, and they often lead to misunderstandings or disputes. A lot of it is interpersonal, which is the first type of conflict. This one is very challenging. This is probably one of the hardest ones because sometimes you get two people and they just don't get along, and it's all related on interpersonal relationships. The next type is task-related conflict. This is what happens when folks are not aligned on, or they have a disagreement on how tasks should be performed, right? Task-related conflicts can impact efficiency and also often lead to missed deadlines. The last type of conflict is role-based conflict. This is when there's a lot of finger pointing, right? One team thinks another team is responsible for something. There are unclear roles. Who is actually responsible for that? When members are unsure of their roles, it can lead to frustration and confusion, conflict, and this is definitely one you're going to want to tackle. What are the triggers? We talked a lot today about communication. Both Stephanie and Bob did a great job explaining ways that you can communicate better. So Many conflicts stem from misunderstandings or miscommunication. Differing values and priorities, whether it's a personal or it's job or task related, when team members have different goals and they see different ways of doing things, or they are unclear about a direction of a project, for example, that can lead to conflict in the production environment or the office in your organization. And last is workplace and stress. We're doing more with less. We're working lean. I think Bob mentioned that. So there's a lot of work to be done, and that comes along with a high level of stress. So high pressure and heavy workloads can exacerbate tensions, get people stressed out, and then people react negatively to situations that maybe they wouldn't have reacted negatively in the past. Why does conflict resolution matters? Right? We talked about the difficult behaviors, which typically leads to conflict, which leads to negativity in the workplace. It's something we can't avoid, but how we address it is what really matters, right? So actually addressing your conflict can go a long way in your organization. We've talked about decreased productivity. We've talked about low morale and damaged relationships. But there are opportunities when you resolve conflict. Enhanced communication, increased trust in your management team. When people know that issues are going to be addressed fairly and constructively, it creates a much more cohesive, supportive work environment. And we touched a little bit on improved problem solving and being creative and coming up with new ideas. Those are all opportunities that can happen when you resolve your conflicts. So you take the diverse ideas and the diverse viewpoints, and if you're handling them and you're managing your conflict, you're going to get opportunities for growth, for sure. All right, section 2 is about mediating conflict. So what do we do about conflict? We want to master the art of conflict mediation. It is hard. It is difficult, but as a manager and a supervisor, being able to mediate conflict is critical for keeping your team working effectively and working well together and getting along. It helps solve problems quickly, builds trust, ensures everybody feels heard and respected. It fosters a fair and positive work environment and also keeps teams focused and productive. What I'm going to go through now are some tips and some techniques for conflict resolution. Picking a strategy, right? So there are several techniques that you can use to resolve conflict and mediate these sessions. So as a manager and supervisor, sometimes with your HR representative, you're going to get involved in mediating a disagreement or a conflict between some of your employees. Picking the right approach is critical to making that happen effectively. And there are 3 fundamental strategies for conflict resolution: negotiation, collaboration, and compromise. And we're going to go a little bit deeper into each one of those, and I'll give you some key elements and some tips for success. Negotiation. Negotiation is a structured process where employees involved discuss their differences to come to a mutually beneficial solution. Negotiation is coming to a mutual decision on an issue that satisfies the interests of everybody involved. The key elements as the mediator are to be prepared. Do your homework before you get there. This is a planned mediation. Sometimes mediation is not planned, but when you're planning a mediation, you want to make sure that you're prepared. Understand the issues, the interests of people involved, the objectives of all the parties involved. Preparation is critical to making sure you're on the right strategy and addressing. Communication. Talked a lot today about communication, and Stephanie and Bob gave you some really good insights on communication. Effective negotiation requires clear, honest communication. Listening is often or more important than speaking. And we talked a little bit about active listening already. We're going to do a little bit more on the next couple slides. And problem solving, focusing on finding solutions, allowing the parties to feel they have achieved a positive outcome is a good part, critical part of negotiation. When to use it? So you're going to use negotiation when the parties have different but negotiable needs or goals, when the relationship is important, and when you have time, right? Time is key here to explore the options thoroughly, because it does take time when you're negotiating, especially when it's a difficult problem that you're trying to solve. Successful tips for negotiation include: before entering the negotiations, make sure you're gathering all your information so you understand all of the scenarios and solutions. Do your homework. Stay calm and objective. You need to stay calm and objective, and you need to work with your parties that you're working with to try to keep them calm and objective. At times, you may have to stop the session and ask everybody to take a moment to collect their thoughts, and then you can go back and resume the mediation. Use open-ended questions. I know it sounds simple, but we're going to reinforce this over and over. The yes or no questions just don't work in negotiation. So you need to use questions like, can you help me understand what your main concern is? Right? Look for the underlying issues and interests of that person, and that will help you clarify misunderstandings. And find common ground, right? Identify the shared interests. This can help build rapport right away. So if you start with what the shared interest might be, maybe they have the same goal, right? So we all have the same goal. How are we going to get there? That can help build that rapport and get to reaching an agreement much more quickly. All right. So we're going to move on to collaboration. Just want to do a quick check of where I am time-wise. I think I'm okay. All right. So for collaboration, the key elements in collaboration are open communication, shared goals, and joint problem solving. Collaboration involves working together collectively and cooperatively to find a solution that meets all the parties' needs involved. It goes beyond compromise by striving for an outcome that maximizes the benefits for everybody and the value for everybody. So if you use these three key elements, you should be good with collaboration. Now I'm going to move on to when to use them. You're going to want to opt for collaboration when long-term relationships are essential, right? So you have two folks that are regular full-time employees, and they're going to have a relationship for a long time. When the problem is complex and also requires multiple perspectives, and when you need to get buy-in from all parties. When that's necessary, when you need buy-in from all employees or all parties, then collaboration is the one you're going to want to choose for that. Tips for success. Creating a safe environment is critical. You need to provide a space where everybody feels comfortable expressing their ideas and concerns. And sometimes it's your reaction that hinders that safe environment. So trust is a cornerstone of any effective collaboration. Encourage participation. As the mediator, you may have to call on people, depending on how many people are in the room. You want to actively involve all of your stakeholders in the discussion and decision-making process. Ask for input from each person and make sure everybody is heard and is considered. You want to focus on the interests and not the positions. And what I mean by this is you need to help all of the parties move away from their initial positions, which is what they want, and explore their underlying interests, which is why they want it. I know Simon doesn't want you to ask why questions, but you don't have to ask a why question to find out why somebody is having a viewpoint or has a position, right? So you want to find out the why. The shift can reveal new areas of agreement if you look at why they want it versus their position on it. So you talk about the why and you generate more options, right? So brainstorming is a great way to generate options. And in brainstorming, you're listing all of your ideas without commentary, so that you can have a lot of diverse perspectives to choose from. Moving on to compromise, which is the last of our three. Compromise is finding middle ground where each party makes concessions to arrive at a mutually acceptable solution. It's about finding a balanced solution that partially satisfies everyone. In compromise, each party gives up something, right? So that makes it different than negotiation. So each party gives up something, but they also gain something of value, which is the ultimate outcome that you're looking for. The goal is to balance the concessions they're making and to make sure that everybody feels that it's fair and equitable process. Being willing to adjust your positions or their positions too, and expectation is key to finding a workable solution. So that's where flexibility comes in. There's going to need to be flexibility when you're doing a mediation using the compromise strategy. Mutual respect. Mutual respect is key, right? Compromise requires understanding the other person's perspective and respecting that perspective. And when do you use it? You want to choose compromise when time constraints exist, when a quick solution is necessary, or when parties are stuck and need a way forward. Sometimes you start with negotiation, but then you'll end up in the compromise world. All right. How do you choose the right strategy, right? Choosing the right strategy, you can ask yourself a bunch of questions, which will help you get to the right strategy, which is, what is the nature of the conflict, right? Is it a disagreement on facts, values, interests? What are the goals of the resolution is another question you can ask. And how important are relationships? So you can pick negotiation when you're looking for a win-win outcome with clear needs and goals. You choose collaboration when shared goals and joint problem solving is essential. And compromise is used when time is limited and when parties need to meet halfway. Choosing the right strategy is about being flexible and adapting to the situation as it unfolds. All right, we're going to go through what are the essential components of effective mediation. Confidentiality. You can't have a mediation session without ensuring that the details of that session are going to be kept private. You create a safe environment that people feel like they can talk and they can be transparent, open, and honest. Your best practices around that are to set ground rules right up front. You tell everybody in the meeting, we will be talking today and it's going to stay in this room. You want to secure any notes or data or anything, any information that was provided during that session. You want to make sure you keep those records and notes confidential and in a secure location. And respect everybody's privacy. Ensure your discussions are held not on the production floor or not out in the office. Make sure you have a private room. And I will tell you, in this world of glass offices, that is an added challenge, right? Finding a room that you're not have people walking by and looking in. If emotions get high, people may start crying. You're not going to want to be right out in the open. Neutrality. Neutrality means that you stay in the middle, right? You don't take sides. And it's important that the mediator is impartial and objective, making sure both sides are heard and understood. The ways you can avoid problems with neutrality is to avoid bias. It might be your own personal bias, right? You may have personal opinions or you may have preferences. You want to make sure you don't influence the people that you're mediating with. Really good mediators, you feel like they're on your side when they talk, and but they stay right in the middle. Equal treatment, making sure each party has the opportunity to express what they want to say and their viewpoints without interrupting. You want to make sure they feel like they had a fair chance to present their side of the story, and you want to use neutral language. You don't want to suggest favoritism or judgment as folks were talking. And a lot of times that is nonverbal. So it's very important to use what you've heard about already today about nonverbal communication. Communication, all right, critical. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this slide because we've talked a lot about communication, but I did want to encourage you to use the I statements. It takes practice. Sometimes it doesn't come naturally, but it's really important when you're mediating to use I statements and encourage the use of I statements for the people involved. So you don't want to put the individual on the defensive right away. So you say, I feel, right? I get angry or I get frustrated when I feel like you don't adhere to the deadlines that we're talking about. Clarifying any misunderstandings is helpful when you have effective communication, and managing emotions. During a heated discussion, you may need to stop the conversation and let employees compose themselves. Again, not in your glass office. Active listening, we've talked a lot about that today too as well. So it involves concentrating and understanding, really listening. You don't speak. If you're listening, you're not speaking. So you're really taking to heart what the other person is saying. Maintain that eye contact, right? Paraphrase and reflect. Ask open-ended questions. Instead of why questions, you would ask, can you give me an example of when this happened? Or can you share more details on your position? You can use those type of tips. Finding common ground. As I said earlier, Stephanie and Bob really set the stage for my presentation today. So we've talked about finding common ground. And that's really the goal of mediation, is to find where you can get to a point where both parties have a common interest and can accept that common interest. Identify shared goals. Focus on interests, not positions. We talked about that already. And the use of brainstorming. Brainstorm solutions. Everybody feels like they had a say in the matter. They'll accept the solution more readily. Now we're going to move on to assertive communication. Assertive communication shows respect for the needs of others. It's different than aggressive communication, because aggressive communication does not show that respect. So what's your take? If you could use the chat again, how do you define assertiveness and the impact on conflict resolution? And this is assertiveness in communication. All right, if you could put those in the chat, I can read a couple out. Getting to the root of the problem quicker. Assertive communication is definitely direct and faster. Agree with that. Eye contact. Choose your words and your thoughts clearly. Mary, I would agree with that. Being proactive, exactly. Not letting it fester, to tackle it right away. All right, thank you for those. Those were very good. So making sure we're all on the same page, we're going to define assertiveness, right? Assertiveness is the quality of being self-assured and confident without being aggressive. It involves expressing one's thoughts and feelings and needs directly, honestly, and respectfully. Assertive individuals communicate their positions clearly and stand for their own rights, but they also respect the rights of others. And that's the key. You're going to stand up for your own. You're going to be clear, not angry when you're communicating, and you're going to respect the rights of others. The impact of assertiveness in conflict resolution, right? So if you're assertive, it promotes clear communication, encourages mutual respect, and facilitates compromise and collaboration. And we're going to go a little bit deeper into each one of these topics. When you're talking about clarity in communication, assertiveness helps individuals articulate their needs and viewpoints clearly, reducing misunderstandings and miscommunications. So you don't have all of that emotion when you're being aggressive, you're just being assertive and you're respecting others. You need to address your conflicts head on rather than avoiding, handling them directly, and prevent issues from escalating, right? Nip it in the bud. It's from a very old movie. Mutual respect. Assertive communication is all about respecting the other's position, right? So you have to have a balanced interaction. You want to engage in constructive dialogue, encourage open and honest communication and dialogue, and that's when you're going to be able to find mutually acceptable solutions. Compromise and collaboration. Here we're focusing on solutions, right? So sometimes you have to compromise. Most of the time you have to collaborate. So by focusing on solutions, you're encouraging a mindset of collaboration. You make it easier for all parties involved to work together on their common goals without distractions of blame and criticism, which is really important. Compromise and collaboration creates a culture of continuous improvement. And we titled my presentation today, Building Strong Teams Through Conflict, rather than managing it, because that is the ultimate goal, is continuous improvement where individuals are more likely to communicate openly about their concerns, reduces the likelihood of tension and conflict, and teams build over time. And section four is about navigating political tensions. Very germane to where we are right now with our presidential election coming up. We have 24/7 news these days, right? The news cycles are constant. Every time you open your browser, especially if you're on Microsoft Edge, you're getting all sorts of pop-ups about, who's leading in the polls and what's going on in the world of politics. Their discussions around politics, again, especially now because the elections coming up, are becoming more prevalent and they are getting more heated, and they also spill over into the workplace. So my purpose here is to equip you with some strategies and control those tense environments, those tense issues that are caused by political differences. I'm going to show you a video next, but I want to start by saying, there are experts that would tell you that you shouldn't ban political discussions altogether at work, right? Instead, you should set clear expectations for what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. And in fact, I believe most of you are probably on this work in the state of Connecticut. You can't ban political tensions or political conversations in the state of Connecticut. I think what we're looking for is balance. So we're not saying you should or you shouldn't do it. We're looking for a balance and making sure that those conversations, you mediate those just like you did all the other conversations that we've talked about today. This one just happens to be on a political topic. We're going to watch a quick video that I mentioned, and this is about stopping politics at work. Again, be mindful of Connecticut state laws and other laws.
Many leaders these days are asking, how can I respectfully keep politics out of the workplace? It keeps surfacing, and I'm finding it never leads to a good outcome. Well, here's a thought. If political conversations have brought misery to your workplace, it might be time to push the mute button for a while. Here's how you do it without seeming like you're crushing free speech. First, validate the problem. If your workplace is big enough, you might create a brief survey asking how many people either feel uncomfortable or have had unpleasant experiences in the workplace because of political talk. If a sizable minority or majority raise their hands, you've got a constituency worth helping. Second, the worst thing you can do is to make it an authoritarian dictate. I heretofore forbid you from talking politics. Instead, frame your proposal as a defense of workplace harmony, not a suppression of expression. Say, it turns out that 83% of us would rather we all take a break from discussing political opinions in the workplace for a year. And finally, come up with a friendly way of defending the boundary, something you can all agree on and use, perhaps a hand signal or a code word or some other easy way of saying, we agreed to a 12-month ceasefire. Cross your two index fingers, smile and zip your mouth. Repeat the acronym of the agreement, TMC, for 12-month ceasefire. Once the signal or code word gets used a few times, it becomes a non-offensive way of setting the norm. We've had a tough year. There's nothing wrong with taking a little time to recover. Thanks for watching. Visit cruciallearning.com/saythat for more tips and resources.
So, as I mentioned, I like the ideas. I like the break idea. Again, you just need to be careful when you're navigating the regulations around banning politics. So, close to the end of my time, but I have a few more slides that I'd like to get through. First is promoting respectful communication. Encourage open dialogue, meaning foster an environment where employees feel safe to express their views. Set the ground rules, which is establishing clear guidelines for discussions to ensure they remain respectful and constructive. And active listening. We've talked a lot about communication and listening, active listening today. Make sure you're training your employees on how to actively listen. Really important, I think, is to maintain neutrality in the workplace, right? So you can have company policies, again, not in Connecticut, that prohibit political campaigning or propaganda within the workplace. And you want to lead by example. So as a manager and a supervisor, you should remain neutral and avoid displaying any type of political biases or favoritism, whether the person, your employee is on, you're a Republican, they're a Republican, or a Democrat, whatever it might be. You want to lead by example and stay neutral. So some final thoughts. We've covered a lot of material today, and I hope you found it helpful. And I hope you have a few takeaways that you can take with you. As we begin to conclude, it's essential to remember that conflict is a natural part of human interaction, but it doesn't have to be destructive. And hopefully you can use some of what you learned today to help it not be constructive. Mediation is key. Effective conflict mediation is about creating a safe space for open communication, finding common ground, and fostering teamwork and collaboration. Two final slides. Make sure you address conflicts promptly. Immediate intervention is key, and use trained mediators when you can't resolve your issues easily. And you need to monitor and adjust. So it's a continual feedback mechanism. So maybe that's an employee survey. They capture feedback. If you do a survey, though, the key to doing a survey is to actually acting on what the feedback is from your employees. So you want to use feedback loops, and you want to do continuous improvement and just as necessary. If you continuously assess and focus on strategies to maintain a positive and inclusive work environment, you're going to get all of the benefits of a highly functioning team and organization. I want to thank you very much for your time. And I don't know that we have time for questions, but thank you very much for your time. And thank you, Diane, for allowing me to be your speaker today.
Well, thank you again, Lisa. And so Lisa's from, as you can see, the Human Resource Consulting Group, and that's a group that has considerable HR expertise. So if you need help, if something, whether it's conflict management or compliance or anything else, you can contact that group, and they've got lots of experts there, including Lisa. And so I'd also like to thank again Bob Dixon from Dale Carnegie and Stephanie Sweeney from eGauge. Thanks, guys. You've all given us lots of things to think about. And I think we have some real tools that we can actually put into action, which is obviously the most important part. Thank you to everyone again for joining us. As I mentioned earlier, probably by early next week, we'll be sending out to the attendees, to the people who registered, a copy of the recording of this webinar as well as the slides. So as always, if you are a CBIA member and if you have any questions for me, you can contact me anytime on the HR hotline or with my direct dial or my email. And until then, thanks everyone again for joining us, and we will see you next time.